Tikrai šaunu matyti jūs visus ir aš suprantu, kad mes turime pradžiai 4 dienų renginį ir, nežinau, pradedu lietuviškai, bet matyti visi turėsim persijungti į anglų kalbą ir darbuoti šį kartą anglų kalbą. Bet turime ir gestų kalbą, tai man atrodo visiškai atrodys gerai viskas. Tvarkojam. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our meeting, our consultation meeting about secondary education. And I want to ask Jolanta to take some start speech.
Thank you, Vainas. Dear colleagues, it's a really great honor for me to start today's meeting. And welcome you all to this virtual room to talk and discuss about upper secondary education in Lithuania and possible direction for its change. Today in this meeting room, we have experts, scientists, practitioners who are already helping us to renew our curriculum, members of the General Education Council, colleagues from the Ministry of Education and Science and Sport, and National Agency for Education. Thank you all for responding to our invitation and joining this discussion. We hope that after the planned discussions moderated by the Professor Phil Lambert, we will come up with a proposal to our policymakers, politicians, and education society on what, why, and how should be changed in upper secondary education to meet the demands of today and tomorrow. I hope that you will not be just passive observers of the discussion today, but on the contrary, you will be actively involved, sharing your knowledge, experience, and insights. I invite you to be active participants and become co-owners of the changes in upper secondary education in Lithuania. So let's start this meeting.
Thank you, Yolanda. Yeah. Welcome, Phil. And maybe I'm not sure. Do we need introduction about Phil? But we know quite well everybody. And let's take for Phil. Yes.
Thank you, and thank you everyone, and welcome. I'm sending my greetings here from Australia, from Sydney, Australia, and I'm thrilled to be working with you all again. I can see some very familiar names and faces, some I don't know, but that's great. We'll, over the period of time we're working on this really exciting and important initiative, we'll get to know each other. And yes, like Jolanta, I really want you to contribute and feel that you can express your view. We'll have workshop sessions where we'll break out into groups that have been organised by the organisers, and some key questions for you to consider. The program, I wonder if I might just get my screen up here now. Let's see. Okay, so Jolanta, can you show me with the thumbs up that you can see the screen? Ah, beautiful. Okay. And is it Zesti who's doing the translation there? Yes. Zesti, I will, let me know if I'm going too fast for you there.
Sorry, Phil. We are not going. Sorry, Phil. We are not going to have a translation today, so you just talk the normal pace.
Apie gestų kalbą, man atrodo.
Oh, okay. Sorry, sign language. You're talking about sign language. Sorry.
Yeah. So, Gesti, just give me a signal if I'm going too fast.
Okay. Sorry for interrupting.
So what we're talking about today and over the next couple of days, we're going to be talking today about looking at trends across the world in senior secondary years, the final years of schooling. We're going to look at some models today, different models. And because this is over several days, it means over time we'll be able to unpack a lot. And by the fourth day, we will have a whole lot of information and considered a whole lot of the implications that will help you make the decisions you want to make or feel you need to make. And day two, next week, we'll be looking at examples of secondary education structures from some selected countries. And I'll also be outlining for you credits and credentialing options. What are some of the different ways that students acquire credit for the work they do, and then how that contributes to their final graduating portfolio, which might be a mark or it might be a series of credentials or micro credentials. Day three, the following week, we're going to look at the various subject area and course options. So we don't want you to worry early on about what are the courses that are needed in contemporary times. I use the word courses in these senior years. More so than subject areas. You can use whatever term you feel comfortable with. Both mean the same. Courses just tends to give it a more, if you like, a young person a sense of their transition from basic education and subject areas into courses for their particular pathway beyond school. What might be the criteria for upgrading your current courses and processes for subject area course redesign. We'll be looking at that on day three. And day four, it's really decision-making around what your principles and priorities that you want, the structure and pathways you feel are the ones you want to explore, and looking at credentialing and some of the implications overall. So in starting here, and by the way, we're going to have times for questions, and we do have the chat line. So if you feel, sorry, I might have, if you have some questions to ask at points in time, please put them on the chat line, and we will get to those. Plus, there's a time at the end for questions. So the areas I'm going to unpack for you are the mega trends in secondary education, senior secondary. I guess it's more commonly known as year 11 and 12. In some countries, it's year 10, 11, 12. Some countries are also looking at year 13 as a possibility as well. So equity and market forces, I'll explain these in more detail in a moment. Student agency and choice versus what's in the national interest. In other words, how much do you give the students the choice of what they study compared to what the nation wants them to study? Relevance, issues about what is relevant in these times for a young person of that age. Deep learning is another trend. In other words, instead of what might be a typical subject area or course period, in some countries it's about 40 minutes. In some other countries it's an hour. Deep learning might mean that it's an hour and a half, or 2 hour double period, if you like, double blocks, so that a far more in-depth learning can take place. And obviously, the more you do of that, what we're talking about there are less subjects, less courses that students do. So in other words, it's less and deeper, not broad and just light coverage across. Differentiation. So in some countries, every student does the same course. in other countries, there are differentiated courses. There's courses at the general, the intermediate, and the advanced levels. Multiple pathways. So yes, it's year 11 and 12, but that doesn't necessarily mean in some countries that you only do that in 2 years. In some countries, you can do that over 5 years. So in other words, you might be doing 1 or 2 courses a year over 5 years. So what do you do with the rest of your time? Well, you might be working. You might be doing part-time work. Or you may have even studied you might be doing some courses outside of school that you want to add to your portfolio. Retention is an important aspect of education across the globe, keeping young people in schools for a longer period than what has been in the past, and blended academic and vocational courses. So instead of having streams where you have students go to a vocational high school or an academic high school, as they do in some countries, vocational courses are included as part of the student's overall graduating profile. And the idea of micro-credentialing, which I'll explain a bit further. Okay, so when it comes to equity and market forces, with equity, what we mean is ensuring that all students access the same curriculum. So some countries are very strong on this, and it's a curriculum guarantee. It means that regardless of whether you're interested or good at a particular course, everyone will do the same subject areas because that is seen as being equitable, that you're not advantaging some over others when there are choices. And I have to say, in some countries, I hate to say this, but they don't trust schools. They think that if you give students choice, actually it'll be the teachers and the schools that will choose what subject the child does. And therefore, they insist that everyone does the same course. They all do the same courses. That way, you guarantee that no one is disadvantaged by their school. And in those countries and jurisdictions, each student attends their designated school. In other words, there's no choice of school or choice of subject. So there are countries that still, that's still a trend in a number of countries. In other countries, there's market forces that are used. So all schools are required to provide a minimal subject areas, but after that, students choose. And schools are free to respond to students' interests and market their course structures. So you might have a school that gives a focus to the arts, or is particularly strong in the STEM area, and students are free to choose to go to that school regardless of where they live. So it's based around the individual student. What are they interested in? What are they good at? And then they go to the school that best meets their needs. And of course, therefore, schools have to market themselves and be able to promote what they do. And really, if a school finds that students aren't choosing to go there, then they're in serious danger of closing. So it has its challenges for the system in managing it. All of these have implications, and when we go to the workshop, I'll be asking you to think about, which of these you like, which do you prefer, and what are the implications? What are the you might like it, but you know it's actually going to have an impact on management, workforce, teacher workforce, issues for the teacher unions, and of course, if students are free to travel, then that means transport will have to consider the issues. But it depends. All these depend on what your preferences are, what you want for these young people. So here we have approaches where it's student choice. It's open. Each student is entitled to develop their own personal course plan based on their personal interests. So it's not a case of being forced to do particular subjects, or it's limited. That's another approach to agency and choice. Each student's personal course plan must be balanced to ensure at least one humanities or arts course is undertaken. That's just an example. So in other words, they will do the national language or languages. They would do mathematics. They might do science. After that, they must do at least one humanities subject. It could be history, or it could be geography, or it could be economics, or an arts course, you know, music or visual arts or drama or dance, something like that. So even though you're giving students choice, you're still forcing them to have a more balanced kind of experience over those 2 years. And then there's the national interest that can influence what a country does. Having mandatory subjects and grouping of subjects. For example, each student must include at least 3 STEM subject courses. Each student must include a vocational course in either a business or a hospitality field. So that's in countries where they've got vocational education, and the country feels that it needs to develop business skills in more students and ability to for part-time work to help the service industry, and hospitality therefore becomes an important course. So it depends what your country wants and what it's looking for as far as its overall workforce. So in other words, regardless of what students are interested in, they're required to do particular course in the national interest more than their own interest. And there are designated targets. For example, a country might have 90%, they want 90% of their students to complete grade 12. So in other words, putting in requirements or legislation that requires students to stay on, they can't leave. Or you've got targets, 80% of the graduates need scores eligible to get them into university. So in other words, the aim of the country is geared towards supporting graduates and improving results. So those 2 years are not just about the student, they're about the country and what the country wants. And in some countries, that's a very, very strict set of targets, and schools are required to keep to those and are made accountable to those. Relevance. So a trend across the globe is that courses need to be relevant in terms of future career interests. So they've completed their basic education. After that, everything should have a link to a career. In other words, you're not just studying more of maths to study more of maths. It's actually got maths that has a practical application to a particular career, or science, or even in the arts. So in other words, everything has to be, every course has to be selected and designed based on its relevance for career. And in doing that, making sure that you're not repeating content from basic education. So this really assumes, if you can bravely do this, that every child that completes year 10 has completed all that they need for basic education, and grade 11 and 12, you're not repeating any of that content. It's a whole new courses because students, it is assumed, have the basics already. Each course must have a clear and specific purpose. In other words, it's a prerequisite for following a pathway, maybe to the health sector, if it's a science course, or a hospitality course, a course in a vocational course, or ICT, an ICT course that is actually linked to web design or working in the ICT industry. Or each course involves the practical applications of what is being learned. Assessment is authentic and not based on examinations, but how one applies what has been learned. So there's less about repeating knowledge and transmitting knowledge acquired, but actually using that knowledge and showing what you can do as competencies in building up a profile of yourself. So when you leave school, it's clear what you can do, not a mark, not a grading, but it actually is specified all that you can do, your capabilities, your competencies. By the way, when we look at some different other countries, I'll be able to explain how some of these are part of what those countries do. Timetables are based around, this is deep learning, extended periods, which might be 90-minute sessions or more. The course content is reduced for in-depth acquisition of knowledge and skills. So each course is really examined carefully, and what's taken out of existing courses are things that actually take time, but actually don't involve a great deal of quality learning. And so deep learning is the emphasis. And that means really being clear in the curriculum design, what this course, what are the essentials that you gain from this course, and only keeping to those. Fewer subject areas are included in an individual student's program. For example, only 5 courses. In some countries, students do 14 courses across all subject areas. And in some other countries, they do 5. I'm not aware of a country that does less than 5, but I am aware of some countries and jurisdictions where the number 5 is typical of what students study. By the way, we'll talk about this later, but in some countries, they might do 7 courses in grade 11, and then they drop 2 and only do 5 in grade 12. So in other words, they choose out of the 7, the 2 that they're most capable in and they enjoy, and they continue with only those with 5. Grade 11 enables students to take, just to mention that, and students are in reduced class sizes. So I don't know what the situation is there in Lithuania, but here in my country, the smallest classes in schools are in kindergarten, the first year of school, year 1, year 2, and year 11 and 12. So, you know, there's 15, maybe even only 8 students in some courses. And of course, to do that and manage that, it means some courses are actually run before school, in the hours before school. Sometimes that's, for example, with advanced students. They might do their course earlier in the morning before the rest of the students arrive. So differentiation, this means subject courses are developed and structured to enable students to select courses targeted at different ability levels. For example, general, intermediate, and advanced. So in other words, you are really pitching each course to the ability of the group. Students that are not strong in a particular area don't have to be in a class with high performing students who want to do more. The courses are based on ability levels. Some countries do that only in a few subject area learning areas: maths, the languages, national language, science, and then other courses are just whole group, no differentiation. But in some other countries, they do have, advanced history and general history and so on. Some courses take place outside of normal hours. I've said that. Some courses provided through distance education. So where there are countries, big countries, where there's isolated people, or simply because the country wants to provide as much choice for students. Some students attend school, but they do some of their courses through distance education. So in other words, the school can't provide a course, for example, in ancient history, but ancient history is provided through a distance education provider or at another school, and online students from other schools join and make up the class group. So that's another way to give students choice using technology. One of the other ways is, of course, course provision that's extensive and includes traditional subject courses, emerging areas, and advanced standing university courses. So in some countries, negotiations are with the university. So a student, for example, might commence an university astronomy course while they're in year 12. They might just do some components of it, and that contributes to their final result in year 12. But what it also does is it means when and if they're successful in getting university place, they've already done some prerequisite, they've already done some advanced standing in the university course. Okay, multiple pathways. So another trend here is secondary education can be undertaken by anyone at any age after completing basic education. So that means 30-year-olds, 35-year-olds can do year 11 and 12. So it means effectively allowing any person to take some courses. They could be at work and they could be doing the course, some subjects at a school. They can extend the period, as I said before, over 5 years with 1 or 2 subject areas a year. Or they could take a limited number of subjects in each of the 2 years and complete the final assessment requirements over 2 years. What I mean by that is a student might decide to do all their maths, year 11, grade 11 and grade 12 in the 1 year, in say grade 11. So they're actually doing 2 years of within one. Of course, that means they're doing less other subjects. And it means that they can actually meet, maybe if it's an examination, they can do the grade 12 examination in maths when they're in grade 11. So they've got that, if you like, completed in grade 11. And so when they go into grade 12, they're only doing those other subjects, and their exams, they do less exams or they have less requirements because they've already completed part of their final results in grade 12. So that's another model that is possible. Retention, effectively keeping students at school. So the school leaving age across the world is typically now about 17 years of age or 18. In other words, in a lot of countries, it used to be around 15 years of age. Countries generally, if they can afford it, are lifting that to 17 or 18. In other words, it's, you know, they're really wanting as many students to complete grade 12 and receive a credential, a senior secondary credential. This is largely out of recognition, a direct correlation between qualifications and individual national well-being. So it's well proven in the literature that social, health, and economic well-being for a country improves when more young people graduate at the highest level they can at school. And that's particularly the case for young women. So the more young women that complete grade 12 and get a qualification, and then hopefully, you know, continue on in some form or other, training or study, and get further qualifications after school, that leads to a healthier woman, a healthier baby, and better well-being outcomes for the nation. So the correlations are all there. The more young women you can have completing grade 12, the healthier your nation will be. And of course, it's largely related to the more you study, the more you learn, the more you grow as a person, the more wisdom around looking after yourself and looking after others, and all the issues related to early leaving of school are not carried through to, you know, in generations of families. The curriculum is restructured to accommodate a greater mix of students than had previously completed grade 12. So when you do that, if you had students in that were 15 years of age and leaving school, you know, number of those would have been happy to leave school. They've done their basic education. They wanted to go off and do work. Now, if the country requires them to stay on, you really have to think carefully about what are the courses you're providing for them, because they potentially are not the typical students that would have stayed on for an academic grade 11 and 12. So it really requires thinking carefully about the mix of students that will be in schools and the mix of courses that need to be provided to keep them engaged and learning, but also attending. Overcoming the stigma in some countries of the two-stream system. So in some countries, having academic high schools and vocational high schools, I know that distinction is, I'm just using those terms. So in other words, students that follow a vocational stream and those that follow a more academic stream where the high schools are differentiated. Number of countries are moving to blend these so that In other words, vocational, in some countries, vocational, if you take a vocational path, it's seen that you are, you're taking a less rigorous pathway, that, that it's of less value to the nation. Other countries are recognizing that vocational learning is really valuable and needs to be considered in the mix of offerings for students. And of course, if you've got more students staying on, then vocational courses may well be attractive to them in their course profile. So a suite of courses in vocational vet in schools, vocational education and training in schools included, and students can choose those in grade 11. Often the popular vet schools are linked to current or future post-school plans. For example, a student wanting to do hospitality because they want to work in a restaurant and earn money part-time, which they might be doing while they're at school, or they might be doing it when they start university. So in other words, to keep themselves, have an income, they've got a hospitality certificate, which means they can work in a restaurant or they can serve alcohol or whatever. Not that they learn that in school, but they can learn how to do barista and so on, or childcare if they want to work in the as a nanny or doing part-time childcare. So some schools are giving students that blend. And so even some highly academically gifted students will do these courses so that they have certificates. That means that they can get part-time work. And of course, advanced standing in post-school vet or university courses acquired through these blended curriculum. The final area, we're going to come back to all of these, and I'll give you a chance to ask any questions. So if you want to put some questions in the chat line, please do. Senior secondary schooling over grades 11 and 12 can be structured to include micro-credentials. So these are short courses, externally issued, and there's less emphasis on a final exam. So for example, you might do a course with Google or with Apple, or there might be another business in the local area that offers a micro-credential in some skills that they do, or there might be a communications course or something like that. And so a student might do this over 10 weeks only. They acquire a certificate. And so in some countries, universities are accepting students that have what we call micro-credentials. So they don't come with, a mark from the end of year 12. They come with a portfolio with a whole lot of certificates that they've acquired, micro-credentials, badges, they're sometimes called, that symbolize that they've completed all these courses and they have these competencies, and that can get them placement into university, or it can get them placement into a particular work. So as I said, entry into university based on a range of measures, which include micro-credentials, and school-based assessment given significant importance, judgment regarding competencies. So in Japan, for example, now when students graduate from grade 12 and go to university, public universities there, the most popular, the schools have to provide a portfolio of the competencies that students have. The final examination mark, which was everything in Japan, is now only forms part of what enables a student to get accepted into public university. So other countries are looking at all these different ways to, if you like, move away from a final mark in exams or a final, if you like, grading, and sometimes away from a comparative grading to a profile of what the student can do, a clear indication of all their competencies, which enables them to be considered by work or university or training. I'm going to stop that there. Let me see, I'm trying to work out how I stop sharing.
At the top of your screen should be a line with stop share.
Ah, there we go. Okay, so I'm looking at the chat line and we've got lots of hellos, but not many questions. So I'm seeking help from Irina or Rasa. How do we get some questions from people? I'm sure there are questions they have about what I've outlined there.
Okay, so I encourage people to ask questions, and if you need any help in translation, so let us know. We will help with translation. But meanwhile, I can ask a question, if I may. Your first trend speaks about national interest versus market trends. Yeah?
Yes.
So, and it's usually why can you just elaborate on why student choice is associated with market trends? Why is it so? If a student chooses to study art, why is it always marketplace, interest in the
okay. Yeah, I'm using market in a different way. So the students are setting the market. They're the ones setting the market. So they're basically saying, we don't care what your school is offering. I don't like what you're offering, so I'm not going to go to your school. I will go to a school that is providing the arts because that's what I'm interested. I want to do dance, drama. I want to be an artist. I want to be an actress or actor. I want to be in the media. So I'm going to look for a school that offers those courses, not one where you want me to go. So that when you give students the choice, it effectively means they are setting the market.
Okay. Okay. Now it's clear. Okay.
And of course, what happens, the corollary of that, the kind of outcome of that, is that schools then start to look for what are the interests of students and make sure they're offering courses in those areas. They market themselves, so it becomes it's a different approach to education where the agency is in the hands of the students, and the providers, need to respond. Of course, the opposite of that is giving students no choice and that they attend their local school, and whatever the school provides, it provides. And that can mean some schools might be able to provide a whole range of courses for their students, whereas others might have a very limited number.
And in that case, what are the mechanisms in place in those countries which offer a lot of, courses, that these courses are of the relevant quality and the content is relevant to upper secondary?
Right. Sorry, the courses are provided by the jurisdiction, the country. So it's not the school developing their own courses. Although there are some countries where that does happen. They have to get the courses approved by, Irina, it would be like a school sending into you their course that they've designed, and you giving it, you'll have some, if you like, principles and measures, and you could approve it as an approved course. But it means that the central agency creates a whole number of courses, and then it's up to schools to decide which ones that they will offer in their suite for students. This counters a view that can happen, and that is that schools really only offer the courses they offer because of the teachers they have. So in other words, the teachers, the adults, are determining what students do out of what they can do. I'll give you an example. In some countries, well, my own country is an example. In some states, students might do, in a school, they might have to study German or French as a language. Now, that's because they're only French and German teachers. Yet Australia as a country, China and Japan are our greatest trading partners, and many of the parents would want their children to learn Japanese or Chinese, but the school's only offering German and French because the teachers aren't prepared to go away and acquire another language to teach. So, and the system's not, isn't recruiting and replacing German. And so in other words, it's a fine balancing act between maintaining teacher numbers and what they do and meeting the needs of the nation and the students.
Okay. Gal kolegos iš tikrųjų bandom paklausti ir lietuviškai galit mes bandys, ar Irena, ar kažkas padės išversti, ar angliškai, ar turit klausimų?
Aš turiu.
Taip, klaus.
So I'd like to ask about differentiation. You said
yes,
that, enable students to choose courses targeted at different ability levels. Do students choose themselves what level they would like to go, or a school suggests?
It's usually a negotiated matter between the parents, the students, and the school. The school strongly recommends the course. In some countries, it's reasonably open, and depending on some people on this line may not understand this, but the equating of marks for university, some students actually choose easier courses. Like they might be able to do advanced course, but they choose intermediate or general because they don't get any great credit for doing the advanced courses. So there's it depends on the way the universities rank the courses and rank what a student has done and gives it some form of, if you like, credibility and credential and credit. So remember before I said some advanced courses are done in smaller groups before school. So that might mean, for example, advanced students, there might be, say, 6 of them, do an 8 o'clock, go to school at 8 o'clock, whereas the rest of the school start school at 9. Those students do the advanced course, but they might also do the intermediate course as well. So they kind of they get extra credentials for doing the more advanced work. as well. So it varies. Some do both. You know, as I said, some only do are streamed, and of course, in some countries, you know, if there's an assessment of you at the end of grade 10, you know, that determines which of the courses you'd go into in grade 11, which level.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Maybe more questions. I have one question, maybe. Phil, you present a lot of trends for us. It's very interesting, but can you say it's some correlation with some geographical situation of country, or it's depend on some other ideas? What trends it's more popular?
Yeah, no, yes, absolutely. I think it's fair to say in Western English, Western speaking countries, giving students choice is a fairly common approach. So in other words, less mandatory, more what we call in those countries electives. Students elect what they do. There is some, when we look at the models later in the second part of today, I'll show you the different examples. So there's different approaches to that. Some countries that have a very strong, like, you know, as I said before, Brazil is a country that believes equity equals everyone doing the same. And that's a country where they do 14 courses. But by grade 12, they've only got about 20% of students who attend, even though they're, you know, 90% are expected to attend. The students just can't keep up, and they don't, you know, they don't attend school. So it's been a failure, even though they know it's been a failure, by the way. Even though the whole idea was supposed to be about equity. Many of the Asian countries had a strong commitment to exams and final exams, and many of those have experienced a lot of anxiety issues with their young people. Hence, Japan's looking for something a little bit broader than those final exams. Korea is another country, South Korea, that's wanting to take the pressure off students a bit with less emphasis on exams. So yeah, it's, and of course, a lot of it depends on government cycles and whether the government is prepared to make a radical reform or not. And countries that have strong unions, I have to say, that are highly influential with government, invariably, sorry to say this, but what it means is the keeping teachers in jobs and giving less choice to students. It tends to be the balance is more towards the adults than the students' needs. And of course, increasingly STEM. So many countries have an interest in STEM. So even those that, my own country is an example here where really you only had to do in one of the states here, my state where I live, you only had to do English as the only mandatory subject in year 11 and 12. As of 2024, all students will have to do maths as well. Once they had to do maths, then it was dropped. It became students didn't have to, but now, you know, we need more STEM capable young people. And so that's caused this to happen. The other thing I think that's fair to say, this idea of being able to not see grade 11 and 12 as 2 years, and what some people do is they change the terminology. They don't call it grade 11 and 12. They call it preliminary and final, right? And that means you could do preliminary over 3 years and then do your final in 2 years. So you do less subjects over a longer period, and it means you can be doing work, part-time work. So countries that really, and I suspect, by the way, you know, post-COVID and recession and so on, it may mean that, you know, many models will be explored in keeping with the need for young people to either find work or their families to have someone earning something in the household, and therefore it might be a model that fits particular countries.
Okay, thank you. Maybe more questions?
I would try.
Natalia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, thank you for your presentation, and as a little bit difficult question maybe. How can you, or maybe you can see or recommend something, how to find this balance between those countries who preferred to take more, to give more freedom for students and for more personalization options, and between the states or government priorities or some country priorities of country. Can you recommend something or some implications, some insights on this?
Yeah, Natalia, is it Natalia?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. In the next part of today, and under models, we're going to look at that. We will look at that, and we'll look at the strengths and the weaknesses of all those approaches. But yes, you can. So, for example, you can have mandatory subjects like math. You might decide to have Lithuanian language, maths, and it could be a general science, or you might have biology as a course, or physics. So you can have a mandatory course. So students must do the national language, they must do maths, and they must do a science. After that, it's reasonably, you give students a choice. They can choose 3 other subject areas, courses. One has to be in humanities, one has to be in the arts, and one has to be in, say, you know, physical education or health or vocational education. So in other words, you give students choice, but it's balanced. They end up with a balance at the end. They're not all doing the same subjects because you're giving students choice within those humanities, arts, physical education, technology, or other learning areas, foreign languages or something. You're giving them a choice, but you're, you know, so there's, that's a way that you give both. You give, the nation is making sure that everyone has STEM related capability, but if someone wants to pursue the arts, they get the opportunity to do that. And there's another model where you just have those 3 STEM related subjects, and a student could then they can choose 3 other subjects, and if they choose them all from the arts, that's okay. So they end up, you know, Natalia ends up graduating not only with skills in STEM, but also in the arts. And therefore you can do STEAM.
Okay.
Did that answer your question, Natalia?
Yes, let's continue in the next session.
Okay. Yeah, you will see.
Okay.
If I may, because I received a question and I have to translate. Loretta, she wants to ask you, Phil, what are the requirements for the schools who are implementing upper secondary education in terms of numbers of students, of infrastructure, teacher competences, and how schools manage to offer this great variety of different courses?
Yes. Okay, so it does vary across the globe, of course, but generally now there is an agency within a country or a jurisdiction, a state or a province that authorizes teachers and monitors teacher workforce. So in other words, if the universities are graduating too many arts teachers, visual arts teachers, basically the universities and the students are told they're not going to get jobs. So in other words, and the country can give incentives to universities or requirements, depending on their legal structure, for particular subject areas, you know, for them to have more graduates in those areas. So you can steer what universities do in terms of who they graduate. You can also require them the students have to meet certain requirements on the behalf of the nation in terms of their own abilities. And as I said, in particular subjects. When it comes to schools, you know, there's a big difference between rural settings and metropolitan settings. There are big high schools in, you know, China, like most high schools are about, you know, 2,000 students. In Australia, you know, and 1,000 students would be a big high school. And of course that would be grade 7 through to grade 12. Some countries have separate high school, like senior high schools, campuses, colleges, they call them campus or college, senior campus, senior college. And sometimes those are, you know, in old university sites, they take them over so that they've got a bit of the students feel like they're almost adults. They're, you know, they are young adults and they've got a more relaxed kind of atmosphere and they're not mixing with, you know, 12 and 13-year-olds. They're on their own. So there's a different, Loretta, there's, it varies across the globe, but the key to it, of course, is do you give the school the choice of who they appoint to their school and what are the courses they offer, or are they required to offer a, you know, a broad curriculum? And then all these Loretta, they involve factors depending on your preferences. So if you want students to have a lot of agency, it means you got to give the school's got to be a little bit more flexible in what its staff mix is. If you don't want to give, if you want to tightly control that every school has the same formula of teachers in the same kind of mix of subjects, then it's no doubt it's going to mean that students will have less agency. They'll have to do courses even if they're not very good at them and they don't like them. So it's really, you know, the challenge beyond basic education is you're dealing with young adults who, I guess, you know, have decided whether they really love school and learning or not. Those, if you require them to go on, you want to keep them engaged. And also, you want to make sure that who is graduating from your school is graduating with, you know, really strong capabilities that's good for them and good for the country. Okay, so this is the task that we'll be doing. So as Vanis said, you'll be going into a mixed group soon, just by magic. We're going to break soon. We'll have 5 minutes break for bathroom, or if you want to get to something, coffee or something like that, a quick break. We'll be back at 11:15, and you'll be in a group, discussion group, and you'll have with you a convener, someone to help you lead through the discussion, and we'll be getting someone to report back briefly. The report back has to be really brief. So as you can see on the screen there, which of the trends that I talked about do you find appealing, interesting for you? Something you think you really want Lithuania to consider? Which of the preferences out of these and why? So in other words, you know, do you want to make sure every student does exactly the same course, or do you want the students to have free choice or something in between? How much should the national interest determine what the students do? How relevant should you make the courses? Are the courses now that you've got relevant for people of that age moving into as young adults? Deep learning, do you like this idea? Students doing less courses but doing them deeper and leaving really as, if you like, having greater expertise but in a limited, a reduced number of subject areas. Differentiation, do you like the idea of the different course levels? Multiple pathways, do you like the idea of someone being able to do grade 11 and 12 over 5 years, or doing it in a way that meets their interests, where they can even package it within a single year, do 2 years in 1 year, and mix and match, you know, how their course plan looks. What's your view about retaining as many students as possible? What do you think about blending vocational courses and making those high schools offer vocational courses as well as academic courses? And what do you think about micro-credentialing, this idea where students acquire all different courses, not just from the school, but from other providers? Okay, so we're going to, when we come back, these are the kind of questions we'll be asking. Which directions or trends do you find appealing and why?
Maybe to have some presentation or some notes from different group. Let's start from group number 1, who will take some notes. Who will present? Do you have?
I suppose I need to speak.
Rimantas, yes.
Yes, we had a fruitful discussion, discussed all these aspects of and trends of upper secondary education, and very different positions were expressed. But we agreed that every school should provide equal possibilities for students. And this means that all upper secondary schools, in all upper secondary schools, should be taught mandatory core subjects. But we don't agree, and we don't know what is these mandatory core subjects. How many of them? Let's say, sorry. And let's say one of us said that can be schools without teaching math, let's say. And I think not that not everybody agrees with such position, and now in future we should discuss how many subjects should be mandatory for all students, and everybody agreed that students should be allowed to choose special courses, additional special courses.
Okay, so there's a tension there between core, in equity, and choice, and getting that balance right. And of course, equity can mean equivalent, doesn't mean it has to be equal. So it could be that everyone's doing maths, but not necessarily at the same level because it needs to suit them. But also the choices can be options that are within a range, but not open-ended. Okay, so will we go to the second group?
Yeah, number two, I was in this group, and we will have we had a lot of debate, but we agree that student choice and national interest, this trend, it's quite important. To the other hand, we discuss a lot about different pathways for our students and micro-credentiation. It could be as well quite important recognition of student achievement. For us, it was quite important trend. And our idea why we discuss about our experience, about our situation, we discuss about as well our new government, about liberal part and conservative party, how it will influence in our trends. So it's our main debate.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody from our group as well want to add something.
Well, the interesting thing to add in there, the countries that have been successful in putting in place a really good strategy are those that have been able to get agreements between different political parties. So in other words, regardless of the change of government, both sides, both parties, or even if there are small micro parties, everyone agreed what had to be in the interests of the nation and students, and getting that balance right, so that you don't change one period after another, having some continuity. Venus, I think to your point there about asking your team if anyone wants to add.
Yeah.
I should have said earlier, with these kind of workshops, and they're large groups you've got within each workshop, what we're not necessarily expecting is total agreement of everyone. It's really getting the first lot of discussions about what our personal views are, and then obviously we'll work through what the models and the principles that it might apply. So we've got enough days to be able to work on this. We don't have to come to an agreed decision at this point.
Okay, so group number 3.
Yes, thank you. Our group was talking about the attractive goals in each trend. So we couldn't find the best 3 or 4. In each of trends, we saw some interesting and good things which could be combined into one appropriate for the Lithuania. We were discussing about, and the question was about the balance among mandatory and optional subjects and courses. About that possibility, also experts were talking that Lithuania is a small country, and we should take care about it. And also we couldn't go only for the priorities only for students or only for national level as the country. We should take care also motivation of students and think about how to keep it and rise it all over the teaching and learning process. Also, expert mentioned that it would be nice to take care about professional development and even that possibility to show even in 9th grade, 9th class, and also should think about sustainability of educational ideas and wish that education shouldn't be so too much how to say pushed on political changes, too quick changes, to think about sustainability and take care about students and the system in general. When we took some interesting points, we shared more details, ideas which put in template, and we also have a hope that we'll fill that form with our investigations after that group. And the last question was mentioned, is it secondary education should be mandatory to all up to 10 grades, and then to find out possibility to be more optional, more individualized in 11 and 12 grades. And we stop on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, lots of points there, and a lot that can be taken up throughout the 4 days. And as we go towards the end, ultimately your decisions, just like you started off, Loretta, will be based on the principles that you establish are the important things here. So thanks. That was really, really interesting. Okay, we're up to
Group number 4.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I will represent group number 4. The discussions were very interesting. We had very different opinions, and it was quite difficult to come up with the decisions. But talking about the trends, student choice versus national interest, that was what we were discussing in depth. And everybody agreed that what we have now, the mixture of these two trends, is quite a good solution for Lithuania. Not to leave everything for students to decide, but also to have some national priorities and to combine these two trends. That would be nice to keep in future also. We didn't talk about equity and market forces. That's what I suppose that it was not quite relevant to Lithuania, according to our experts. What draw the attention of the speakers of our group was deep learning, differentiation, and blended academic and vocational trend. That was very interesting. Micro-credentials raised quite a number of questions according to certification of external courses. How can we assure quality of them? That would be quite difficult for our system to have such procedures. Talking about deep learning, we tried even to decide what courses should be reduced, and we didn't come with the solution. But everybody agreed that we should reduce the number of courses, especially in grade 12. But we do not have the solution what courses should be left out the curriculum.
No, that's fine. In other days, we'll be looking at different courses and different. In our next session, we'll be looking at different models and how you might go about that. So interesting, some very interesting points you've made there. And as I said, we're not looking for agreement. Even if there, your question about micro-credentialing, we don't have to kind of find the answers and include or exclude anything at this stage. If people like the idea of students acquiring a whole bank of credentials, then it means the system has to respond to that. And how could you? We can come to that later. And if it's too difficult, that's fine. But there are implications in any decision you make here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's go to group number 5.
Labą dieną. Paįvairinsime kalbinę gamą.
Okay.
Suteiksim galimybę gerbiamui Filipui paklausyti ir lietuvių kalbos. Taigi, mūsų...
No problem, no problem.
Taip, mūsų grupė išsirinko 4 kryptis. Gal didžiausias dėmesys buvo skirtas teisingumui, pirmai krypčiai.
Okay, so if I may just stop and help shortly and translate, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so we apologize because we ran into problem. My computer is running out of energy, and there's an energy problem in my home, in my house. So I'm using another device, which is not so convenient, but I will be helping people to translate their ideas. So this group was talking a lot about the equity, and they think that the equity is one of the important issues when talking about upper secondary education.
Kodėl? Todėl, kad grupės nuomonė teisingumas yra vienas svarbiausių veiksnių, ne tik tai besimokant ir įgyjant kompetencijas, bet apskritai gyvenime. Argumentacija būtų tokia.
It's not only equity is important for us as humans, for our lives. Therefore, they gave preference for equity.
Kita kryptis tai yra gilusis mokymasis. Tai daugiausia grupės dalyvių palaikė šitą kryptį, todėl kad vidurinis ugdymas tai yra jau tikslinis pasirinkimas mūsų jaunimo. Ir todėl nedingsta, sakykime, tie baziniai raštingumai, o būtent yra jau susiformavę įgūdžiai ir siekia savo daug tokių gilesnių, tikslesnių tikslų. Todėl tas gilumas yra labai svarbu.
Okay, the most members of this group, of group 5, prioritize deep learning because upper secondary it should be focused. It is optional for students and those who decide to take it, to pursue for upper secondary. They should be allowed to choose what they want to learn, and therefore it's important to allow space for them to make choices and to deep things, to learn things deeper. So basically the idea is that it should be very focused.
Yeah.
And allow them to achieve their goals that they have for their lives, being students.
Irina, we need to wind up soon. So if Bina, have you any more points to make?
Okay, let's go to group number 6. Last group.
Okay, I will state some ideas.
Okay.
We talked about, like at the beginning, we talked about the main problem in our education, and we clearly want to say that we have a so very serious problem, a clear-cut distinction between secondary and upper secondary education. So it's the most, in my point of view, problematical point in Lithuanian education. And if we're talking about how to make such kind of clear distinction between secondary, upper secondary education, is we talked about deep learning, and deep learning, it will be to some extent ensure such like a new position and new like idea in our education. Some peoples from higher education talked that a lot of pupils are coming to schools, high schools, without not developed higher ability skills. It's also some problem. When we are talking about general education and talking about the upper secondary education, it's important to develop some skills which were so important to continue learning in higher education. So it's like a main problematical thing. Our problems touched by other groups, I think, and it will be some. I wanted to concentrate on this issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So Phil, maybe we have time for break, but maybe you have some comment?
No, just thank you very much, Solius. That's a very good point about the university. And in some countries, university has a very strong influence on what happens in grades 11 and 12. And in some respects, almost, sorry to say this, I'm not talking about Lithuania here, but can have too much influence, that what happens in grade 11 and 12 is only preparation for university, but there's a broad group of students going on to grade 11 and 12 who some will go to university, some won't. So I think getting that balance right between what are the competencies you need to be able to manage in university settings, both subject specific and general, that's a key point. And we can pick that up when we talk about courses and principles behind when you're analysing your current courses. Okay, I think we're ready for our lunch break. It's a bit late for lunch here in Sydney, but for you, it must be just about right.
Yeah, yes. Okay, you will have till 1 o'clock, we will have a break.
Yes, and we'll see you all back at 1 o'clock. Yeah. Enjoy your lunchtime.
See you.
Bye.